I still remember the first day I stepped foot inside the villa. My husband George and I had saved every penny for years, working double shifts, patching old clothes, eating beans and rice more times than I can count. But when the keys finally turned in that heavy oak door, it felt like stepping into a dream. The house wasn't just bricks and wood, it was a symbol. A promise that sacrifice wasn't for nothing. George and I used to sit on the porch in the Austin evenings, the cicadas humming, and he'd smile at me and say, "Maggie, this house will outlive us both. It'll be David's one day. A home he'll never have to worry about." Back then I believed him. Before I go any further, let me ask you, where are you watching from? Are you from Texas like me, or maybe somewhere far away? Tell me in the comments below, I'd love to know. And if stories like mine touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss the next chapter. Life in the villa wasn't always easy, but it was filled with love. When George passed away too soon, it was that house that kept me going. The garden we planted together still bloomed every spring. The kitchen echoed with David's laughter from when he was a boy. Every corner carried a memory, a reminder that I had built something worth leaving behind. David was my pride. I raised him through hard times, made sure he never felt the hunger I did, never saw the bills I stayed up late to pay. When he graduated college, I thought, finally the sacrifices had borne fruit. He'd have a good life. And then he met Vanessa. At first I tried to welcome her. She was beautiful, sharp-tongued but charming. David looked at her like she was the sun itself. I told myself, if she makes him happy, then she's welcome here. But slowly things began to change. It started small. Vanessa insisting on hosting dinners at the villa, bringing her parents, her siblings, her cousins. "It's so spacious here, Margaret," she'd say with a smile. "It would be silly to cram everyone into our apartment." I bit my tongue. Hospitality was part of who I was. But soon her family stopped treating the villa like a guest house. They treated it like theirs. Shoes scattered in the entryway, loud voices in the living room, demands for meals cooked in my kitchen. One night I walked into the den to find Robert, Vanessa's father, lounging in George's chair, a beer in his hand. He looked up at me as though I were the intruder. "Great place you've got here," he said casually. "Feels like home already." His words chilled me. I pulled David aside later, whispering, "Son, this isn't right. They're here too much. This is our home." But instead of agreeing, he frowned. "Mom, stop being difficult. Vanessa's family just wants to feel welcome. You always told me family comes first." "Yes," I said softly. "But this is your family's home. Yours. Not theirs." He turned away, shoulders tense. "You don't understand." And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt a crack open between us. Weeks passed. The visits turned into stays. Vanessa's brother Mark moved into the guest room, temporarily. Her mother Linda began rearranging my kitchen as if it belonged to her. I'd walk in to find cupboards reorganized, spices replaced, furniture shifted. Every protest I made was met with David's silence, or worse, his sharp words. "Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be." Harder? Harder than what? The night everything changed, David stood before me in the living room, Vanessa at his side. Her smile was sweet, but her eyes were cold. "Mom," David said quietly, "the villa, it's theirs now." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "What are you saying?" His voice was steady, rehearsed. "We've decided. Vanessa's family needs this place more than you. It belongs to them now." The world tilted. My knees nearly gave way. The home George and I built, the dream we bled for, the legacy I had cherished, handed away just like that. And the worst part wasn't Vanessa's smirk. It was the fact that my son, the boy I raised, the boy I sacrificed everything for, was the one who said the words. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. "It's theirs now." I stared at David, waiting for him to laugh, to take it back, to say it was a cruel joke. But he didn't. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the floor. Beside him, Vanessa slipped her hand into his, her smile faint but victorious. "This will be better for everyone," she said sweetly. "You won't have to worry about upkeep anymore. My family will take care of everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Your family? Vanessa, this villa isn't yours to give away." Her eyes glittered cold. "It is now." The next morning I woke to the sound of hammering. Mark, her brother, was already in the backyard, tearing down George's old tool shed. "Gonna make this space more useful," he grunted when I confronted him. We're thinking of putting up a game room. This is my husband's shed, I snapped. He built it with his hands. You have no right. He cut me off with a smirk. Lady, the papers say otherwise. Ask your son. I turned and there was David watching silently from the porch. He didn't say a word. The betrayal stung sharper than the hammer's blows. By the end of the week, Vanessa's parents had moved into the master bedroom. Linda walked through the halls with a measuring tape, muttering about new curtains. Robert sat in George's chair every evening, watching TV as if he'd owned it all his life. I was left with the smallest guest room, my belongings shoved into boxes. My kitchen, my sanctuary, was no longer mine. One afternoon I walked in to find Linda stirring a pot of soup. "Oh, Maggie," she said cheerfully, "I hope you don't mind. I rearranged the pantry. It was such a mess. You'll thank me later." I clenched my fist. That pantry was fine for 30 years. He patted my arm like I was a child. "Don't fuss. You should be grateful. We're bringing new life into this place." Grateful. The word tasted like poison. Outside, the whispers had already begun. At the market, Mrs. Jenkins leaned close to another woman as I passed. "Did you hear? Maggie's son gave the villa to Vanessa's folks. Poor woman must not be able to handle things anymore." Another voice chimed in, pitying. "Well, at least the house is staying in the family." Family. As if I weren't standing right there. One evening, I caught David alone in the garden. He stood by the rose bushes George had planted, hands shoved in his pockets. For a moment he looked like my boy again, the one who used to bring me wildflowers from the fields. "David," I whispered, my voice breaking. "How could you do this? How could you take everything your father and I built and just give it away?" He flinched but didn't meet my eyes. "Mom, you don't understand. Vanessa's family needed help. They've struggled for years. This house, it's more than we need. But it's all I have," I cried. "This villa is my life, my memories, my home. And you've given it to strangers." His jaw tightened. "They're not strangers. They're my family now." The words shattered something inside me. That night, lying in the cramped guest room, I stared at the ceiling and tried to breathe past the pain. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me that intruders now walked where George once did. Every laugh from the living room reminded me that my son's loyalty belonged elsewhere. I pressed George's photo to my chest. "I don't know how much more I can take," I whispered into the dark. But a small voice inside me answered, "This isn't over." Because even if David had chosen Vanessa's family over me, I would not be erased from my own home. Not without a fight. The days that followed blurred into a waking nightmare. I moved through my own villa like a ghost, stepping around boxes and strangers who now called it theirs. Vanessa's family laughed in the living room, their voices echoing through the halls that once held George's quiet hums and David's boyish laughter. One afternoon I went to the study, the room where George and I used to keep our important papers. The filing cabinet stood open, half empty, drawers rifled through. Panic surged in my chest. My marriage certificate, George's will, the deed to the house, gone. My hands trembled as I searched. That's when I found it. A folder labeled Transfer of Ownership. I pulled it out, my stomach twisting. Inside was a stack of legal documents, stamped and notarized. At the bottom of the first page was a signature. My name. But it wasn't mine. The letters were stiff, the curves too neat. My hand always trembled slightly at the end of the T in Margaret. Here the line was smooth, perfect. Someone had practiced. My breath caught. This is a forgery. A voice behind me made me jump. "Everything okay, Maggie?" It was Linda, Vanessa's mother, standing in the doorway with a smug smile. She didn't even bother to hide the folder she must have planted back in the cabinet. "You shouldn't stress yourself with all that legal stuff. David and Vanessa are handling things now." My voice shook. "You forged my name. You stole my house." Linda chuckled, her tone patronizing. "Oh, honey. You must be confused. The notary was there, the witnesses signed. It's all legal. Maybe you just don't remember signing." Her words sliced deep, twisting doubt into the wound. I clenched the papers in my fists. "I know what I signed. And I know what I didn't." She shrugged, stepping closer. "Well, maybe no one else will believe you." That evening I confronted David. He sat on the porch, head in his hands, the Texas sun sinking low behind him. "David," I said, shoving the papers at him. Look me in the eye and tell me I signed this. He glanced at the folder, then away, his face pale. Mom, Vanessa said it was just a formality. She said you wanted to make things easier, to pass the house along while you're still with us. My chest burned. Did you watch me sign? Did you see the pen in my hand? His silence was answer enough. Tears blurred my vision. So you let them forge my name? You let them steal everything your father and I built. David finally looked at me, then his eyes tortured. I didn't know what else to do. Vanessa said if I didn't agree, she'd leave me. But I thought this way everyone could be happy. Happy? I spat. You call this happiness? Watching your mother shoved into a guest room while strangers tear down your father's shed. He stood abruptly, his voice cracking. Stop, Mom. You don't understand. I can't lose her. And with that he stormed inside, leaving me shaking on the porch. Later that night I sat in the dark, the forged papers spread out before me. My chest ached with grief, but beneath it, something else stirred. Rage. Melissa had manipulated him. Linda had mocked me. They thought age made me weak, easy to silence. But I wasn't done. I pressed George's photo to my heart. They've taken everything, George. But I'll fight. I swear I'll fight. The next morning I tucked the forged documents into my purse and walked out the door. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about proving I still mattered. That I wasn't a ghost to be written off, or a frail old woman to be erased. And I would find someone who believed me, someone who could help me fight back. The morning air in Austin was heavy with heat when I stepped off the bus. My purse felt too light for the weight it carried. The forged papers inside, the last fragile pieces of proof that my life had been stolen. I walked down Miller Road until I saw the ranch house. Faded shutters, a porch swing that creaked in the wind, and beyond it, horses grazing in the field. I remembered the woman who lived here. Laura Briggs. She'd been a detective once, sharp as steel. Folks in town used to say she could spot a lie before you even opened your mouth. But she'd left the force years ago after exposing a local official's corruption. Now she lived quietly on the edge of town. I prayed she would hear me out. When she opened the door, Laura looked older than I remembered, hair streaked with gray, eyes shadowed, but there was no mistaking the sharpness behind her gaze. Well, Margaret Parker, she said slowly. I didn't expect to see you here. Looks like trouble found you. Tears burned my eyes as I held out the folder. Trouble didn't just find me, Laura. It stole my home. We sat in her kitchen, papers spread across the table between us. She flipped through them with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime in evidence rooms. When she reached the signature, she stopped. This is supposed to be yours? Yes, I whispered. Her eyes narrowed. Not even close. See here? The loop on the G is wrong. Too clean. And this line, it's practiced. Whoever wrote this was copying your style, not signing naturally. I swallowed hard. So it is forgery. Clear as day, she said. But that's not the only problem. Look at the notary stamp. Vanessa Parker. The blood drained from my face. She notarized her own forgery? Laura leaned back, crossing her arms. That's fraud stacked on fraud. If this goes to court, she won't stand a chance. But what? She tapped the folder. Paper alone won't save you. Vanessa, whatever she calls herself, is smart. She's already painting you as unstable. I've heard the whispers around town. Folks think you're confused, maybe even losing your memory. My throat tightened. That's what Linda said. That no one would believe me. Exactly, Laura said. If you want to win this, we need witnesses, bank records, notarization logs. We need to show a pattern, not just a single forgery. Otherwise, they'll make you look like a bitter old woman inventing stories. I pressed my hands together, trembling. Can you help me? Laura studied me for a long moment. It won't be easy. Vanessa's clever and your son, he's in deep. If we do this, she'll come after you harder than ever. Are you ready for that? I thought of George's chair stolen. My garden rearranged. My son's voice telling me my home wasn't mine anymore. I've already lost everything, I said quietly. What more can she take? Laura's eyes softened just slightly. She closed the folder with a firm snap. Then let's fight. That night back at the shelter, I lay awake on the narrow cot. Around me, the building creaked, the air conditioner hummed, but my mind raced with Laura's words. Fraud. Forgery. Proof. For the first time in weeks I felt something other than despair. Hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. Still, fear gnawed at me. Vanessa wouldn't sit quietly once she realized I was digging. She'd fight to keep her claws in that villa, and she'd fight dirty. I pressed George's photo to my chest and whispered into the dark, "I'm not done, George. I'll bring our home back. No matter what it takes." And in the silence I almost believed I heard his voice again. "Don't give up, Maggie. Not now." 2 mornings later, Laura pulled up in her old Ford truck, honking twice. "Come on, Maggie," she called. "Time to get to work." I climbed in, clutching the folder of forged papers against my chest. My stomach twisted with nerves, but Laura's presence was steadying, like a shield I never knew I needed. Our first stop was the county clerk's office in downtown Austin. The building was cool and dim, the smell of paper and ink heavy in the air. Behind the counter, a clerk handed over a thick ledger, bound in cracked leather. Laura flipped through it quickly, her finger tracing down columns of names. "Here," she muttered. "Vanessa Parker. Licensed notary." I leaned closer, my breath catching as I read the entries. In a single week, Vanessa had notarized 4 separate transfers of property and bank forms, 2 of which listed witnesses who, as Laura quickly pointed out, lived out of state. "That's impossible," she said flatly. "They couldn't have been present in Texas. Which means either the log is false or the documents are." She snapped a photo with her phone. "That's fraud, plain and simple." I stared at the neat handwriting, anger boiling in my chest. Vanessa had planned this carefully, weaving her lies into the official records themselves. From the clerk's office we walked down to the bank. The manager, a nervous man in a gray suit, recognized me immediately but avoided my eyes. "Mrs. Parker, I'm sorry for your situation," he began. "But your son had full authority to act on your behalf." Laura slid the forged document across his desk. "And did you personally verify this signature?" The manager shifted uncomfortably. "Well, the notary stamp is invalid," Laura cut in sharply. "We've already confirmed discrepancies in the log. If you don't want your bank tied to a fraud case, you'd better cooperate." His hands trembled as he opened a drawer and pulled out a folder of withdrawal slips. "These are the transactions. But I'll need them back." Laura smirked. "You'll get copies. We'll keep the evidence." In the shelter that night we spread the slips across the table. Some bore David's signature, but others, horrifyingly, carried my name. Not my real hand. An imitation. I traced the crooked letters with my finger. My own name stolen. "They've been practicing," Laura said grimly. "This wasn't sloppy. This was deliberate. Vanessa knew exactly what she was doing, and David let her." My chest ached. My own son. How could he watch this happen? Laura placed a hand on my arm. "Because she's got him under her thumb. But the cracks are showing now. Sooner or later he'll have to face the truth." But Vanessa wasn't about to sit still. The very next day whispers reached me at the market. Women I'd known for decades turned away as I passed. One muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "Poor Maggie. She's confused, doesn't know what she's saying anymore." Another shook her head. "It's a shame. David's been so good to her, but she just keeps imagining things." Their pitying looks cut deeper than their words. They didn't see me as a victim. They saw me as an old woman losing her mind. That night, back at the shelter, I sat staring at George's photo. "They're trying to erase me, George," I whispered. "Make me a ghost in my own town. But I won't let them." Laura's voice came firm from across the room. "Then don't. We have evidence, Maggie. Real solid proof. But we need one more thing. Someone willing to stand up and say they saw what really happened." I lifted my head, meeting her eyes. "A witness." She nodded. "Exactly. Someone who can break through Vanessa's lies." I lay awake long into the night, wondering who, if anyone, would have the courage to stand with me. Because one thing was certain. Vanessa wasn't just stealing my house. She was stealing my name. My reputation. My very place in this world. And I would not let her. Laura was right, we needed a witness. But where would I find one? Most of my neighbors had already turned against me, poisoned by Vanessa's whispers. That's when I remembered Mr. Alvarez, the owner of the small grocery on the corner. He'd known George for years. George used to stop in for cigars, and later David would pick up milk there as a boy. If anyone noticed what really happened that day, it would be him. The bell above the store jingled as I stepped inside. The place smelled of coffee and old wood, the shelves neatly lined with canned goods. Mr. Alvarez looked up from behind the counter, his weathered face breaking into a cautious smile. "Maggie," he said softly. "I've been hearing things. I didn't know what to believe." My throat tightened. "Please, Mr. Alvarez. You've known me for 30 years. Do I look like I've lost my mind?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, you don't. Tell me what's happening." I pulled the forged documents from my purse, spreading them across the counter. "They say I signed these. But I didn't. Vanessa notarized them herself. David stood by and let it happen. I need someone who saw something, anything." He frowned, flipping through the papers. Then his eyes lit with recognition. "Wait. That afternoon David and Vanessa came in here. She was waving some papers, telling him he needed to hurry. I remember because she borrowed my pen." My pulse quickened. "Do you remember what she said?" Mr. Alvarez rubbed his chin. Something like, "Your mother won't know the difference. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late." I thought it was just marital talk. But now. I gripped his arm, tears stinging my eyes. "Would you testify to that? In front of a judge?" He looked pained but then nodded firmly. "Yes. George was my friend. I won't let his wife be robbed like this." When I told Laura that night, her eyes lit with fierce satisfaction. "That's it, Maggie. That's the crack in their armor. With Alvarez backing us, Vanessa won't be able to hide behind her lies." For the first time in weeks I felt a flicker of real hope. But Vanessa must have sensed it, because the very next evening, I realized she was no longer playing in the shadows. I was walking back from the shelter when a sleek black car slowed beside me. The window rolled down and there she was. Vanessa, perfectly composed, her lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Taking evening walks now, Margaret?" she purred. "Be careful. This city can be dangerous for someone your age." My heart pounded. "You won't scare me, Vanessa." Her smile widened. "Oh, I don't need to scare you. I just need to remind you of something. David is my husband. He belongs to me. And if you keep pushing, you'll lose him forever." I clenched my fist. "I already have." Her eyes flashed, the mask slipping for just a second. Then she leaned back and the car sped off, leaving dust swirling in the air. That night I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the shelter seemed alive. Every creak of the floorboard felt like a warning. I whispered to George's photo, "She's coming for me, George. But I'm not backing down. Not this time." The next morning Laura arrived early, a stack of files under her arm. "She's rattled," she said with a smirk. "Which means we're getting close. Now we push harder. We take this public. Once the press hears about an elderly widow cheated out of her home by her own son and daughter-in-law, Vanessa won't be able to spin it anymore." I swallowed hard. "Public? Everyone will know." Laura's eyes softened. "Yes. And it will hurt. People will gossip, some won't believe you. But truth has to see daylight, Maggie. Otherwise, Vanessa wins." I looked down at George's picture in my purse, then back at Laura. "Then let's bring it to the light." 2 days later, Laura parked her truck outside the Austin Chronicle. The building loomed tall, its glass windows reflecting the blistering Texas sun. My stomach churned as we walked inside, clutching the folder of forged papers. The editor, a middle-aged man with glasses slipping down his nose, greeted us in a cluttered office filled with stacks of newspapers. Laura laid the documents on his desk like cards in a high-stakes game. "This is fraud," she said bluntly. "Forgery, false notarizations, theft. Mrs. Parker has been robbed of her own villa by her son and his wife." The editor flipped through the papers, eyebrows rising. He lingered on the signatures, then on Mr. Alvarez's written statement. "If this is true, it's big. Elder abuse, fraud, family betrayal. People will read this." He looked at me over his glasses. "But Mrs. Parker, once this goes to print, there's no turning back. Everyone in Austin and beyond will know your story." My hands trembled in my lap. "Let them know. I have nothing left to lose." The story broke 2 mornings later. Austin widow claims son and daughter-in-law forged her signature, stole family villa. My photo filled the front page, lined face, weary eyes but determined. The article laid out everything. The notarization logs, the forged withdrawals, Mr. Alvarez's testimony. At the shelter, the women crowded around the paper. "You did it, Maggie," Clara whispered. "You're not invisible anymore." But outside those walls, the reaction was far less kind. At the market, whispers trailed behind me like shadows. "She's airing her dirty laundry for the whole world. Imagine turning on your own son like that. Poor David, married to such a sweet girl and now stuck in this mess." Each word was a dagger. For every kind stranger who squeezed my hand and said, "Stay strong," there were 3 more who turned away, eyes cold. Vanessa struck back fast. That Sunday, she and David appeared on the courthouse steps with cameras flashing. She wore a modest cream dress, her hair pulled back, her makeup barely there, like a saint. "I love Margaret," she said to the microphones, her voice trembling with rehearsed sorrow. "She's like a mother to me. But she's confused. These accusations aren't real. David and I have been caring for her tirelessly. It breaks our hearts to see her in pain like this." She dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. "We only want what's best for her." The crowd murmured in sympathy. Headlines the next day painted her as the devoted daughter-in-law caring for an unstable widow. And just like that, my name became the punchline to their pity. Back at the shelter, I slammed the newspaper onto the table. "She's winning, Laura. She's turned the whole city against me." Laura didn't flinch. "Let her. Sympathy is cheap. Evidence is not. We have the documents, the logs, Alvarez. When this hits court, her crocodile tears won't hold." I pressed my hands together, shaking. "But what about David?" He just stood there beside her, silent. "He didn't defend me. Not once." Laura's voice softened, though her eyes stayed hard. "He's under her thumb. But deep down he knows. One day he'll have to choose." That night I walked the villa's perimeter under cover of dark. Lights blazed inside, laughter spilling from the windows. Vanessa's family crowded around my dining table, glasses raised in a toast. Through the glass I saw David, my son, sitting at the head of the table. His shoulders sagged, his eyes dull. For a fleeting moment I thought he looked out the window toward me. Our eyes nearly met. But then Vanessa leaned close, whispering something in his ear, and he looked away. The laughter grew louder and I stood in the shadows, invisible in my own home. I clenched my fists, whispering to George's photo in my purse. "She can play the saint all she wants. The truth will come out." And though doubt gnawed at me, I felt a spark of steel in my spine. Because Vanessa may have stolen my house. She may have stolen my son. But she would not steal my voice. The letter came in a thick white envelope, stamped with the county seal. My hands shook as I tore it open at the shelter's kitchen table. Notice of civil action, defamation and elder instability. My knees nearly buckled. Vanessa wasn't just defending herself. She was coming after me. Laura scanned the document quickly, her jaw tightening. "She's suing you, Maggie. Claiming you're defaming her character and that you're mentally unfit." My throat burned. Mentally unfit? Laura looked up, eyes flashing. "She's playing the card I warned you about. Trying to convince the court you're confused, maybe even slipping into dementia. If the judge buys it, everything you've said becomes worthless." I sank into the chair, tears welling. "She wants to erase me." Laura placed a firm hand on mine. "Then we make sure the judge sees the truth." The courthouse was colder than I remembered. Marble floors gleamed under harsh lights, and every sound echoed off the tall ceilings. People gathered in clusters, whispering. I could feel their eyes on me, some pitying, some suspicious. At the defendant's table, Vanessa looked radiant in a pale blue dress, her pearls glinting under the lights. She smiled sweetly at the judge, at the jury, at the reporters. At her side, David sat stiffly, silent as a shadow. When the bailiff called my name, I walked forward, clutching George's photo hidden in my purse. My knees trembled, but I forced my back straight. Vanessa's lawyer spoke first, his voice smooth as silk. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a case of fraud. This is a tragedy. A grieving widow, confused by loss and age, has begun to imagine betrayals that don't exist. My clients, David and Vanessa Parker, have cared for Margaret tirelessly. But now she slanders them publicly, dragging their names through the mud. We're here today to protect their reputation, and to protect Margaret from herself." The jury nodded, murmuring sympathetically. I wanted to scream. Laura rose next, her voice clear and sharp. "This is not confusion. This is theft. We will show you fraudulent documents, forged signatures and notarizations that defy the law. We will show you a widow robbed not only of her villa but of her dignity. The question isn't whether Margaret is confused. The question is, how far will Vanessa Parker go to silence her? Her words rang out like a hammer, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in the jurors' eyes. When Vanessa took the stand, her performance was flawless. She dabbed delicately at her eyes. I love Margaret. She's like a second mother to me. But lately, she forgets things. She gets upset over simple paperwork, insists we stole from her when we only wanted to help. She pressed David's hand dramatically. It breaks our hearts to see her this way. We just want to protect her. The courtroom sighed in sympathy. One juror even shook his head, pity plain on his face. Then Laura called me up. My legs felt like lead as I swore the oath. I told my story, the shed torn down, the kitchen rearranged, the forged signatures. My voice shook, but I forced every word out. When Vanessa's lawyer cross-examined me, his smile was sharp. Mrs. Parker, you're 73, correct? Yes. And it's true you've had health issues. Some memory lapses? No, I said firmly. He leaned in. Isn't it possible then that you simply forgot signing these documents? I raised my voice stronger than I thought possible. No. I know my own hand. And that signature is not mine. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. For once, the pity shifted, not toward her but toward me. That night, back at the shelter, I collapsed into bed, exhausted. Laura sat at the edge, her hand steady on my arm. You did good today, she whispered. You showed strength. But this is only the beginning. Vanessa won't back down, not when she's this close to having it all. I stared at the ceiling, my chest heavy with fear and determination. She can keep lying, I murmured. But the truth is coming for her. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the judge called for the next witness. Laura's eyes gleamed with quiet fire. She had been saving this moment, and I didn't even know it until now. Your Honor, she said clearly, the defense would like to call Mr. Alvarez. Vanessa's head snapped toward her lawyer, shock flashing across her face. David stiffened beside her. The doors at the back opened and Mr. Alvarez walked down the aisle. His worn jacket, the ledger under his arm, his steady gait. It was like watching truth itself walk into the room. He swore the oath and sat, his hands folded neatly on the stand. Laura approached. Mr. Alvarez, can you tell the court how you know Mrs. Parker? He cleared his throat. I've known Margaret and her late husband George for more than 30 years. They shopped at my grocery. We were friends. And do you recall seeing David and Vanessa Parker in your store on the day these documents were supposedly signed? His eyes locked on Vanessa. Yes. I remember it very well. A hush fell. Please tell the court what you heard. He opened his ledger, flipping to a page marked with a neat date. They came in that afternoon. Vanessa had papers in her hand. She told David, sign quickly. Your mother won't know the difference. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late. The words rang through the room like a gunshot. Gasps erupted from the gallery. Even the judge leaned forward, frowning. Vanessa's face went pale. Her lawyer jumped up. Objection. Hearsay. But Laura was ready. Not hearsay, Your Honor. Direct testimony of what the witness personally heard. And he documented it in his ledger that very day. She gestured to the notebook in Alvarez's hands. This is contemporaneous evidence. Reliable, consistent, and damning. The judge nodded slowly. Overruled. The witness may continue. Vanessa's mask cracked just for a moment. She gripped David's arm so tightly her knuckles whitened. Alvarez went on, steady and calm. At the time I thought it was just an argument between husband and wife. But when I read about Margaret losing her home, I knew I had to speak. Laura smiled faintly. Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. No further questions. When Vanessa's lawyer stood for cross-examination, his voice dripped with sarcasm. Mr. Alvarez, you expect this court to believe you just happened to overhear a private conversation? And you just happened to write it down? Alvarez looked him dead in the eye. Yes. Because I keep records of everything that happens in my store. And because I have nothing to gain by lying. The lawyer sputtered, but the damage was done. For the first time since this began, I saw the jury's faces change. No longer pitying me, no longer enchanted by Vanessa's tears. They were watching her with suspicion. During the recess, I sat trembling on the wooden bench outside. Laura leaned close, her whisper fierce. That was the crack we needed, Maggie. The image she built, perfect wife, perfect daughter-in-law, it's starting to crumble. The jury saw it. The judge saw it. Everyone saw it. I wiped my eyes. Maybe now they'll believe me. Laura squeezed my hand. They will. But she won't go down quietly. Get ready, Vanessa's next move will be ruthless. Inside the courtroom, Vanessa clutched David's hand, whispering furiously. His face was pale, his eyes haunted. For a heartbeat I thought he might look at me. Might see the truth at last. But he didn't. He only lowered his head as if carrying a weight too heavy to bear. And I realized then, Vanessa might lose in court. But I had already lost my son. The next morning the courtroom was packed. Reporters jostled for space, their cameras flashing, their pens scratching furiously across notepads. The buzz was louder than ever after Mr. Alvarez's testimony. Vanessa knew her image had cracked. And she was ready to fight back. Her lawyer stood confidently. Your Honor, at this time the plaintiffs would like to call Dr. Leonard Price to the stand. A tall man in a white coat stepped forward, silver hair slicked back, glasses perched on his nose. His calm demeanor radiated authority. I felt my stomach sink. He introduced himself as a neurologist, a specialist in cognitive decline. Dr. Price, Vanessa's lawyer began, you've reviewed Mrs. Parker's medical history, correct? Yes, he replied smoothly. And I can say with confidence that her symptoms, forgetfulness, confusion, paranoia, are consistent with early dementia. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. My chest constricted. Forgetfulness. Paranoia. He was twisting my pain into lies. Vanessa sat demurely, hands folded, her eyes shimmering with fake sorrow. To the jury, she looked like a saint burdened with caring for an unstable mother-in-law. Laura rose sharply. Dr. Price, how many times have you personally examined Mrs. Parker? The doctor hesitated. I haven't exactly. My review was based on medical notes provided by Mrs. Vanessa Parker. The jury stirred. Laura's eyes narrowed like a hawk. So, you never examined her? Not once. He cleared his throat. No, but the notes were thorough. Laura stepped closer. And were those notes from an independent physician? Well, they were written by a family doctor recommended by the Parkers. Laura smiled thinly. So your entire diagnosis of dementia is based not on medical fact, but on papers handpicked by the very people accused of fraud? Silence fell. The doctor shifted uncomfortably. That's not. Laura's voice rang out. Answer the question, doctor. Yes or no? His shoulders slumped. Yes. The jury's eyes turned cold. The spell was broken. Laura drove the nail deeper. Members of the jury, you've heard it yourselves. The only person claiming Mrs. Parker is confused, never examined her. He parroted words given to him by Vanessa Parker, the same woman accused of forging documents, lying to her husband and stealing her mother-in-law's villa. Is that the testimony you're going to trust? Gasps filled the room. Vanessa's face tightened, her composure slipping. Then it was my turn again. Laura called me back to the stand. My knees shook, but I forced myself to rise, clutching George's photo in my hand as I swore the oath again. I looked at the jury, my voice trembling but clear. I'm not confused. I'm not paranoid. I am a mother who built her life with her husband, only to have it stolen by the very people I trusted most. I remember every brick George laid, every rose we planted in that garden. And I remember this. I pointed at the forged documents on the table. I did not sign those. That is not my hand. That is a lie. My voice cracked, but I pressed on. I may be old. I may be tired. But I am not invisible. And I will not be erased. When I stepped down, the courtroom was silent. Not with pity but with respect. For the first time I saw jurors nodding. Not at Vanessa's crocodile tears but at me. David's eyes glistened. For a heartbeat he looked like my little boy again. Then Vanessa gripped his hand hard, yanking him back into silence. Laura leaned close as I sat down. You just won them back, Maggie. Hold on. We're almost there. I nodded faintly, tears streaking my cheeks. Because for the first time I believed her. The courtroom air felt heavier than stone as the judge instructed the jury. You have heard the testimony. You have seen the evidence. Now you must decide. 12 men and women filed out, their faces unreadable. The door closed behind them with a sharp click. The silence that followed was unbearable. Vanessa leaned close to David, her whisper sharp as a blade. "Don't you dare lose your nerve now. Everything we've built, your future, our family, depends on this." David didn't respond. His hands shook against his knees, his face pale as chalk. I sat across the aisle watching him. For a flicker of a moment his eyes met mine. They were filled with something I hadn't seen in years, shame. I whispered under my breath, "It's not too late, David." But he dropped his gaze, shoulders curling in on themselves. The jury's deliberations stretched into hours. I sat rigid, clutching George's photo so tightly the frame dug into my palms. Around us, reporters whispered, pens scratching furiously. Finally, the bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise." The jury filed back in. My breath caught as I scanned their faces. Serious. Steady. The foreman held the slip of paper with trembling hands. "We, the jury, find the defendants, Vanessa Parker and David Parker, guilty of fraud, forgery, and unlawful transfer of property." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters leapt to their feet. The judge's gavel struck. The villa and all associated assets are to be returned to Mrs. Margaret Parker. Restitution will be calculated and sentencing will follow. For a heartbeat the world tilted. Relief flooded me so suddenly I could barely breathe. I had won. But victory came at a price. Vanessa shot to her feet, her composure shattering. "This is a mistake. She's crazy, she doesn't deserve that house." The bailiffs moved to restrain her as she struggled, her voice shrill. "You'll regret this, Margaret. You'll regret ever crossing me." The judge's gavel slammed again. "Order. Order in this court." David didn't move. He sat slumped in his chair, head in his hands, silent tears streaking his face. Laura's hand closed around mine. "You did it, Maggie," she whispered. "You got your home back." But as I looked across the room, watching bailiffs drag Vanessa away while David sat hollow and broken, I felt no triumph. Because what good is a house when the child you built it for is gone? As the courtroom emptied, David finally stood. His steps were slow, unsteady. For a moment I thought he might come to me. I rose, heart aching, waiting. But he stopped halfway, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Mom." Tears blurred my vision. "Then come home." He shook his head, his face crumpling. "I can't. Not after everything. Not after what I let her do." And before I could move, before I could reach him, he turned and walked away, disappearing through the courthouse doors. The world roared with reporters' questions, camera flashes, voices shouting my name. But all I heard was the echo of his footsteps leaving me behind. Laura guided me out gently, shielding me from the press. "Let's go home, Maggie," she said softly. "Your villa's waiting." Home. The word tasted bittersweet. That night, back in the villa, I stood in the doorway of the master bedroom. The furniture was dusty, curtains drawn, but the walls still whispered with George's laughter. I sank to my knees, clutching his photo to my chest. "We won, George," I whispered, sobbing. "But I lost him. I lost our boy." The house creaked around me, familiar and foreign all at once. It was mine again. But it had never felt emptier. The villa smelled of dust and silence when I opened the front door again. For months, it had been filled with strangers' voices, Vanessa's laughter, and the clatter of feet that did not belong. Now it was still. I stood in the entryway, staring at the staircase George had built with his own hands. My heart ached at the memory of him sanding the banister, humming under his breath. "Strong enough for David to run down one day," he had said with a grin. I had won it back. But the boy we built it for was gone. Laura walked in behind me, setting down a box of files. "We'll need to change the locks, clean out what's left of their things," she said briskly. But when she looked at me, her voice softened. "Are you all right?" I forced a smile. "As all right as I can be." She squeezed my shoulder. "This house is yours again. Don't let them steal your peace along with your son." Her words were kind, but the silence of the villa pressed heavy against me. That evening I walked through each room slowly. The kitchen was a mess of mismatched utensils, spices that weren't mine, curtains Linda had hung. I ripped them down one by one, letting them fall to the floor. In the den, George's chair sat empty, a faint impression still in the cushion where Robert had lounged for months. I smoothed the fabric gently, whispering, "It's yours again, George." In the guest room I found a sock stuffed under the bed, probably left by Mark. I tossed it in the trash with shaking hands, as though ridding myself of his stench would cleanse the house itself. By the time I reached the garden, the sun was setting. Roses George had planted still bloomed defiantly, their petals glowing crimson in the fading light. I knelt in the dirt, pressing my forehead against the soil. "We're home," I whispered. "But it's not the same." Days passed. Neighbors stopped by, some with casseroles, others with cautious apologies. "I'm sorry, Margaret," Mrs. Jenkins murmured, her eyes downcast. "I believed what they said about you. I should have known better." I accepted the food with a faint smile, but I couldn't erase the sting of months of whispers. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend so easily. At night, the villa echoed with emptiness. I would sit on the porch, listening to cicadas sing in the Texas dusk, and imagine David walking up the driveway. Imagine him saying, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm home." But the driveway stayed dark. Sometimes I wondered if I had truly won. One evening, Laura stopped by with takeout. She sat with me on the porch swing, the warm air thick with the scent of roses. "You did more than win back a house, Maggie," she said firmly. "You proved you still matter. That you're not invisible. That your voice counts." Tears welled in my eyes. "But I lost my son." Laura's expression softened. "That was Vanessa's doing. Maybe someday he'll see the truth. Maybe he won't. But either way, you stood your ground. And that matters." We sat in silence for a long while, the swing creaking gently beneath us. Later, alone in the master bedroom, I opened the window. A breeze drifted through, carrying the faint sound of laughter from a neighbor's house. Families together, children playing, life moving on. I clutched George's photo to my chest. "I kept my promise," I whispered through tears. "I protected what we built, even if it broke me." And as the moon rose over Austin, casting silver light across the villa, I realized something. Yes, I had lost David. Yes, my heart ached with every memory. But I had not lost myself. Because in the end, Vanessa hadn't stolen my mind or my dignity or my voice. I was still Margaret Parker. And this was still my home.